The world listens back, how the quiet season sparked a new era of gentle cinema. A whisper heard around the world. It did not arrive with fanfare. The quiet season opened quietly in early spring, without the thunder of blockbuster premieres or the glitter of global marketing. There were no teaser trailers engineered for virality, no celebrity TikTok dances, no studio slogans promising that this film would change everything. And yet, in its stillness, something shifted. Audiences began to talk, not in the manic language of trending hashtags, but in the slower, older vocabulary of feeling. They described a film that seemed to breathe, that trusted silence, that made them remember what it was like to sit still for 2 uninterrupted hours and truly watch. In cinemas, viewers lingered long after the credits rolled, reluctant to break the spell. Online discussions replaced plot dissection with reflections about their own lives. Moments of reconciliation, unfinished conversations, quiet mornings with loved ones. It had been a long time since a film asked so little and offered so much. The age of noise. For years, modern culture has equated impact with volume. Social media rewards speed, outrage, and spectacle. The entertainment industry mirrors that logic with louder soundtracks, faster cuts, and endless franchising. The result has been a fatigue disguised as engagement, a global audience perpetually stimulated but rarely moved. Then came The Quiet Season, a film that refused to compete on those terms. Its power lay not in innovation but in resistance. Where others chased velocity, it chose patience. Where others offered fantasy, it offered recognition. Its visual rhythm, long takes, muted light, pauses that lingered just too long, felt almost rebellious. In a media ecosystem that thrives on distraction, The Quiet Season became an unexpected act of cultural deceleration. Audiences rediscover attention. Something profound happens when people are invited to slow down. Across continents, screenings became miniature experiments in collective mindfulness. Viewers accustomed to multitasking, checking phones, whispering, scrolling, found themselves instinctively still. In surveys that followed, many described the experience as therapeutic. One viewer called it a 2-hour breath. Another wrote, "I didn't realize how much noise I'd been carrying until the silence of this film made me notice it." The language people used to describe The Quiet Season belonged less to entertainment than to healing. For some, it wasn't just a movie, it was a mirror held up to a society that had forgotten how to listen. Critics and scholars trace a new lineage. Academics were quick to notice what audiences were feeling. Film schools began referring to the phenomenon as gentle cinema, a genre not defined by content but by intention. It shares DNA with the slow cinema traditions of Ozu, Tarkovsky, or Chantal Akerman, yet it is rooted in a distinctly contemporary yearning: the desire to pause without guilt. Critics noted that The Quiet Season arrived at a moment when the public conversation around mental health, burnout, and digital fatigue had reached critical mass. Its gentle rhythm became more than aesthetic, it became ethical. It argued, implicitly, that art could be an antidote to acceleration, not an escape from reality, but a rebalancing of it. The social moment of silence. When clips of the film circulated online, not through official marketing but through viewers sharing fragments, they carried an unusual tone. Instead of excitement, there was reverence. "Just listen," one caption read beneath a 30-second clip of the wind moving through grass. Another said simply, "Peace, finally." Streaming platforms reported that people watched the film late at night, often alone, often twice. Algorithms struggled to categorize it: too contemplative for mainstream drama, too accessible for art house. But word of mouth persisted, transcending categories altogether. In group chats and forums, people began recommending The Quiet Season not as a must-see movie, but as a necessary pause. The language of empathy. What distinguishes The Quiet Season from other meditative films is its emotional warmth. Its stillness is not cold or distant, it's compassionate. Every frame feels inhabited by care, for its characters, its landscapes, its audience. Viewers responded not just to the plot, but to the tone, the moral generosity that underpins every choice. In an era defined by irony and detachment, the film's sincerity felt radical. Empathy, once dismissed as sentimental, re-emerged as a form of courage. Cultural commentators began connecting the film's appeal to a broader social hunger, a quiet rebellion against cynicism. To watch The Quiet Season was to participate, however briefly, in an act of emotional repair. From fandom to fellowship. Most films generate fandom, The Quiet Season generated fellowship. Across social networks, viewers didn't form communities to idolize the creators but to discuss what peace meant in their own lives. People shared photos of morning walks, stories of reconciliations, playlists of soft instrumentals. There was no hierarchy of taste, no competition for insight. The conversation itself mirrored the film's ethos: kind, unhurried, inclusive. In a landscape where online engagement often turns toxic, this gentleness was disarming. Critics remarked that the culture surrounding the film was part of its artwork, proof that tone can be contagious. The economics of slowness. Even industry executives took note. The Quiet Season proved that a modestly budgeted, quietly marketed film could succeed globally through resonance rather than reach. Its financial performance was steady, not spectacular, but it endured. Weeks after blockbusters faded, it was still in theaters, buoyed by return viewers and intimate screenings. The economics of attention, long assumed to favor velocity, suddenly appeared more complex. Studios began reconsidering how they measure success. Quiet films don't dominate opening weekends, they accumulate over time, like trust. And in an unstable cultural economy, trust may be the only sustainable currency left. A ripple across art forms. The influence extended beyond cinema. Playwrights began writing slow theater, photographers exhibited projects titled Listening to Light, musicians recorded albums inspired by the film's restraint. Podcasts discussed the gentle aesthetic, the return of narrative empathy, of emotional sincerity without sentimentality. Art historians placed The Quiet Season within a lineage of contemplative movements responding to industrial overdrive, romanticism, minimalism, and now, perhaps, this. The movement was less a trend than a correction, a reminder that the pendulum always swings back toward stillness. The generational shift. Younger audiences, paradoxically the most immersed in digital noise, proved to be the film's most passionate advocates. For them, The Quiet Season represented a kind of permission, to slow down, to feel deeply, to not be on all the time. University screenings sold out within hours. Students wrote essays about the ethics of attention. A new generation of filmmakers cited it as evidence that authenticity could survive algorithms. One cultural theorist described the shift succinctly: "It's not nostalgia for the past. It's a demand for a future with room to breathe." The global conversation. Internationally, the film resonated across languages. In Japan, audiences compared it to meditative haiku. In France, critics called it cinema du calme. In Brazil, viewers related its rural imagery to their own landscapes of memory. What united them was the shared recognition that quietness is universal, not the absence of story, but the space where stories can grow. Global discussions reflected a rare consensus: gentleness travels well. The aesthetics of enough. What made The Quiet Season revolutionary was not what it added to cinema, but what it subtracted. It stripped away exposition, spectacle, even background music, until only the essential remained: image, breath, presence. Its visual grammar, long horizon shots, restrained color palette, natural sound, suggested a new form of storytelling built on restraint. Audiences, accustomed to sensory overload, found themselves grateful for minimalism that didn't feel austere but generous. It whispered a cultural truth long ignored: abundance does not equal meaning. Reclaiming the collective experience. The pandemic years fractured how people experience art, private, isolated, mediated by screens. The quiet season helped revive something older, the shared experience of communal quiet. In packed cinemas, the silence between scenes became a form of connection. People breathed in rhythm, strangers shared stillness. It was a collective listening, a secular ritual in a disenchanted age. Observers noted that audiences exited theaters more slowly, almost ceremonially. They weren't applauding, they were absorbing. For 2 hours the world had moved at the same pace, and that, in itself, felt healing. The critique of speed. Beneath its tenderness, the quiet season carried a quiet critique. It asked, implicitly, what constant acceleration costs us, in attention, in empathy, in art. The film never preaches. It simply shows what happens when life is allowed to unfold at human speed, the way light changes, the way a hand hesitates before forgiveness, the way time expands when unmeasured by productivity. In that sense, its true subject was not peace but perception. It reminded viewers that noticing is a moral act. Beyond the screen. The conversation sparked by the quiet season soon extended into daily life. Book clubs began choosing slower novels. Restaurants experimented with no phone dining hours. Streaming platforms introduced quiet mode playlists featuring contemplative films. These gestures may seem small, but collectively they signify a recalibration, a cultural willingness to protect attention as something sacred. For once, a film had not just entertained the world, it had gently retuned it. The durability of stillness. A year later, the quiet season remains in quiet circulation, taught in film courses, streamed in living rooms, referenced in essays about digital ethics. Unlike most cultural phenomena, it hasn't faded, it's simply slowed into permanence. People return to it the way one returns to a poem or a familiar landscape, not for revelation, but for reassurance. It's become a cinematic refuge, a reminder that art can still offer solace without spectacle. The world continues to move faster, but the quiet season endures, unmoved. What the world learned. If there is a legacy to the quiet season, it lies not in its awards or box office, but in the space it opened, the collective sigh it allowed. It proved that attention, once fractured, can be mended through gentleness. It suggested that silence, long treated as emptiness, might actually be the foundation of meaning. Most of all, it reminded people that art need not shout to be heard. Sometimes, the smallest voice reshapes the world simply by refusing to raise it. The closing silence. At the end of the film, as two figures walk away from the sea, there is no music, only wind. Viewers often describe that moment as revelation. But what they are really hearing, perhaps, is themselves. Because in its quiet way, the quiet season did not just tell a story. It taught a skill the modern world had almost forgotten. The courage to listen. And in that listening, the world, at last, answered back, softly.